Okay, so I've just got back from a trip and we've had a few trips away now. Van's 12 months old and I've never checked the wheel bearings. I've seen a lot of posts where people say, you know, they've found them with no grease, some have found them with grease, poorly packed, all that sort of stuff. People have replaced their bearings just because they don't like the Chinese ones. So I'm actually going to have a look at mine today and I'm going to clean them, repack them. I've got a new set of seals. I've got some stuff down here. I'll show you in a second. Got some stuff down there. I went and bought a new set of seals and I have to give a bit of kudos to Muzz because I found his post which talked about the bearings and the seals, etc., what you needed. Just went to my local BS, anyway, bearing place in town, gave them the part numbers and they whipped out two seals, and it was 14 bucks. I don't intend on replacing the bearings. I'm hoping to just clean and repack, new seals, hopefully keep the old seals as spares. I'm going to show you how to do it because I think a lot of people pay a lot of money for wheel bearings and getting them repacked by someone else. It's not actually rocket science. It's pretty easy if you're willing to get your hands dirty. If you don't want to get your hands dirty, you can wear gloves, but it is a pretty straightforward job. And I'll show you now the stuff that I bought today for doing the job. All right, so the few things that I bought today, just the new seals, no big deal. A bit of terps, that's what I'm going to wash my bearings in. Doesn't have to be, and a bit of degreaser that I'm going to clean them off with water and hose them out later on. A bit of high temp wheel bearing grease, Penrite stuff, no big deal. And I bought some brake and parts cleaner because while I'm in there I'm going to clean the brakes up, give them a bit of a scuff while I'm at it as well. And I'm going to lift it just with the standard jack out of the Prado, and I'll show you how to do that in a second and we'll get into it. So the Caravan doesn't come with any jack, etc., etc. The only thing that I've noticed is that the tool for doing the legs is actually the same tool that will fit the wheel nuts. I do have all impact guns. I've got plenty of gear here. I could do it with the impact guns. I don't want to, purely because I've been a mechanic for a while now and not practicing currently, but I'm a mechanic by trade, and using an impact gun on chrome plated nuts tends to chip the edge off the chrome, and then you get wheel nuts that rust and look horrible. So I'm going to crack them with the tool and then I'm just going to spin them off the rest of the way with the wheel nuts, but not before I jack the van up, so I'll get to that now. Okay, so I've taken a little bit of time now and I've jacked the van up. Wheels are spinning free, handbrake's released, and so that we don't suffer from death by caravan today, I've got a jack stand here, which is just up to the chassis, holding that up. I've also put the legs down, front and back, and I've got the jack just in under here. You can see, I think. Now that's a nice little flat spot in there. I had a little bit of a crap moment. When I first started, I didn't have the jack in the right spot and it spat the jack out. Fortunately, it went forwards, not backwards, but it did come out with force. But right in front of where the shock absorber comes down, there's a nice little flat spot to mount the jack. And as you can probably see, I've got a bit of, it's just an offcut of armour-treated pine sleeper that I stick under the jack just to give it a bit more lift and elevation. It's the standard jack out of the Prado, nothing special about it. But as you can see now, my wheel is free. I did also find that when I went to undo the wheel nuts with the tool that lifts the legs or does the legs, wasn't strong enough. So this little fella was actually twisting and distorting before it was actually cracking the wheel nuts. So I've broken the wheel nuts free, so I should actually be able to just spin them off now with that if I want. But I used a breaker bar with a deep 19mm socket, and that fitted nicely. So I broke all the wheel nuts free to start off with using the breaker bar, and now I'll be able to spin them off and take the wheel off, which I'll do, and we'll go from there. So the wheel's off, as you just saw me do. Now I'm going to take the bearing cap off, and underneath that there'll be a split pin and a nut, which will then allow this to come off. It's actually quite a big chunky setup, which, you know, it's a good thing. So I'll take that off and then we'll have a look at what the bearings look like. Well, there's plenty of beautiful clean blue grease in a cap and plenty of grease there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this split pin out here in a second. This is the bit where I was saying you get dirty, so have some rags on hand. I really don't like what they've done here. It's actually a little bit dodgy, and I'm going to rectify that when I put it back together. So you can see here with the split pin, they've actually folded both pieces of the split pin over this way. And it would be better because you can see here by the nut's not going to turn because it actually comes straight through into this is called a cascellated nut because it looks like a castle. Now you can see that it's not going to turn as such because that's there, but I'm going to fold when I put it back together. I'm going to fold one piece down and only one piece over. And I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to reuse this. So I'll take it out in a second and I'll put this down and I'll take it out. And then I can spin the nut and I can have a look. I know some of you will be sitting there going, he's using a dirty set of Stilsons, and I am. But when I put it back together, I will use a shifter. I'm just, can't be bothered getting up to go and get it. All right, so that's the hub off, and I haven't got into this bearing yet, which I will in a second. There's plenty of grease. They don't look horrible. The grease is actually pretty good, so they'll be fine. I'm not going to replace them. I will just clean that hub off, or the stub off, and everything's okay. So I'm going to give it a really good clean all my brakes down, clean my hub out once I take this bearing out, which means I've got to punch this seal out as well. So I'll do that, and then I'll go through the process of cleaning and repacking. All right, so I actually want to, keep the seal safe, so I'm not going to punch a screwdriver into it and ruin it. So I want to reuse the seal that's on there. So in a second, you'll see me punching it out with a drift. Now, I am being careful to do that. Some of you will be going, oh, you're buggering your bearing. I'm not. But I do need to make sure that I'm gentle with it. So I'm going to punch through from the inside to use the bearing to push the existing seal out. Now, hopefully I'll be able to do that without wrecking the bearing, but if not, wrecking the seal, sorry, but if not, I've got another seal anyway. So I'm going to do that, then I can clean the hub. In an ideal world, that seal is okay. Like, the seal springs come off, but that's just a case of feeding the seal spring back on. And for all intents and purposes, I can clean that and reuse it should I want to. The bearing's fine. It's a big chunky mongrel thing, but it's got plenty of grease in it as well. So now I'm going to clean these. And as you can see, this is the bit that I was saying, if you don't like getting dirty, you won't like this job. But it's actually really good for your skin. At the end of the day, your skin will be super soft. It's just your hands will be filthy. All right, so I'm going to clean these up now and we can get on with the repack. Just before I get on with the repack, you can see that in there, there's a heap of grease. Now I know that some of you aren't having that experience, but there's heaps of grease there. It's clean. There's heaps of grease there. I really probably didn't even need to be doing this job, but I am anyway, just for the satisfaction. So I'm going to now wipe that clean. Now this process that I'm doing here is basically a rinse and repeat. You'll do it on this side and you'll do it again on the other side. So now there's heaps of grease in there. And I'm just going to scoop as much out as I can with my fingers. It's just less to clean. All right. Right, I'm going to put this down so I can get the job done. Right, I'm in the middle of the unfun bit. This is the dirty, messy bit. I've got the stub clean and wiped off. Pretty clean anyway, not finished. And then I've got all my bearings down here in a nice little tub of turps. Now, it doesn't have to be amazing. I'm just going to clean these now with a brush, get them nice and clean. I'm also going to clean the hub over there. One thing that's important to note while you're doing this, if you get your fingers, your dirty spots on this, grease on it, you need to make sure you get all off. Good wipe over with thinners or metho. Same on these. Try not to put greasy hands on your brake shoes because it'll actually create hot spots, and hot spots then lead to brake shudder and your brakes pulling one way or the other. So you could find that your van pulls left, pulls right. So I'm in the process of cleaning, and one thing I noticed was there was grease behind the bearing shell or the cup. And I thought, well, it didn't make any sense at all. So on a little bit of investigation, and I'll spin the camera around, the bearing shell is this bit here. It was actually sticking out. It was sitting up further, probably 5 mil from being honed in or bottomed out in the housing, which you might go, well, why does that matter? Well, what that matters is that if that shell was to move while I was driving, because it had the ability to go inwards another 5 or 6 mil, it would give me a wheel that's about to fall off. It would flog itself to death. So I've actually, you can see all the grease that's just popped out. I've actually just hammered it down 5 or 6 mil. It was flush with that stop point. So they've just gone bang, bang, bang all the way around, and where their punches hit that lip, they've stopped. But it actually needed to go down another 5 to 6 mil, I suppose. That cup has had to go down. So now it is safe. It's not clean now because there was a heap of grease there, but man, that is ordinary. Anyway, I will now give it another clean and go again. All right, I've got all my bearings clean, my hub's clean. Now I'm just going to clean my brake shoes up so I can have a bit of a look and see if they are falling apart. And I'm just using this stuff, brake and parts cleaner. Some of you might be going, oh, saw you got a compressor, just hit it. No, brake dust is bad. Don't like it in my lungs, so we're going to clean. It's also very satisfying to do it this way. Now, back in the day, brake pads used to be made from asbestos. So I have done my fair share of sucking that stuff in, but because we're not back in the day anymore, we'll clean it off properly, de-dust it, and once I've done that, I'll give it a bit of a blow off, just to dry it. All right. This is brake and parts cleaner, so it will dry and leave little to no residue. And as you can see, I'm not getting dust off there now. Alright, so that's clean, I've dried it off. Just a little brake lesson for those who have never seen brakes, don't understand brakes. Just know that when you put your foot on the pedal, the car slows down. What's actually happening, your electric brakes activate this little magnet here. So that's your electric brake component here. They are a part that does wear out over time. That electric brake, or that electric magnet, grabs on the inside of the drum here. As you can see, that's why that's worn. So it creates a friction surface. The process of it doing that, as your wheel is turning this way, it grabs this. A magnetic field is created here, magnetizes and sucks it onto your drum. Not sucks, but anyway, it pulls this way. And as you can see here, and that's pushing your brakes out and applies the brakes to slow your van down. This little adjuster here is what gives you the right clearance between the drum and the shoe. And if you've got all of those things set in harmony, your van should stop. So, all right, so bearings, they're both clean. These are the bits that need the grease. The rest of the grease that we put in the hub is just to make sure these little babies don't run out of grease. And this is the bit that probably mystifies people, and they go, oh, I don't know how to do this. You can do this by hand. You can actually buy little bearing packers as well, which are shaped like a cone. And you put them on and pump grease through them. That's a very hands-off version. I'm going to clean my hands first because that'll be going into my bearings. But I'm going to show you in a second the process of repacking these with fresh grease so that you can do it yourself. All right, we're down to the dirty end of the job. So I am left-handed. If you're right-handed, well, you do it the opposite way, or whatever you feel comfortable. So for me, I'm left-handed, so I'm going to take my right hand, which is cleaner than it was, and I'm going to scoop it into my tub of grease, and I'm just going to go like that. This is the dirty bit. I'm taking the bearing, which is in my dominant, my left hand, and I'm holding it, as you can see, just like this. The reason I'm doing that is because when I do that, it actually pushes the cage out. Now my finger's stuck. So I'm holding it like so, pushing the cage out. No real mystery here. And then using this part of the cage, I'm just going to work my way in. Keep going into the grease that I've just put into the palm of my hand. And as you can see, that eventually pokes it out the top. You can see I'm getting grease coming out the top of my bearing. That means it's worked its way all the way through. Now I don't spin the bearing to go, oh, that's packed. I now just turn it around a little bit, the whole thing, not the outer casing, and I keep going, doing the same. Whoops, just slipped. More grease coming out the top. So I now just turn it around a bit more, and I do that the whole way around the bearing until I've worked grease all the way through the bearing its full circumference. So I'm just going around, as you can see, and I just keep going around until I've done that the whole way around the bearing. And as you can see, I'm getting grease all around the bearing, but you can see I'm also eating the grease away on my hand, and I'm nearly there. I've just got this tiny little bit to do there. And that's done. So now, as far as that bearing goes, that's packed. That's one. Repeat. So I get my grease still in my hand. I'm just doing that to move it down my hand a bit. And I'll probably need a bit more because this is a larger bearing. And I'm just basically pumping the grease by working it into my hand through the bearing. It's coming out the top. Move it around. I find this satisfying. Some find this repulsive because they don't like getting their hands dirty, but I get a deal of pleasure seeing the grease come through, knowing that that bearing is good to go. Now I have looked at my brakes while I'm doing this, and I think they'll be okay. not 100%, but I think they'll be right. And I'm just bringing some more grease down, as you can see. And as you can see, I'm just working my way through. I've nearly got all the way through the bearing, and I'm nearly out of grease on my hand. You might find when you're doing this, if you haven't cleaned your bearings completely, you might find a bit of old black grease coming through. That's okay, it's not worth panicking about. It's done. They are 2 bearings packed, and as you can see, I started with a big handful of grease. It's now down in the bearing. So that is the mystery of packing your bearing, unraveled for you. But I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with the hub too. So I'll turn off the camera. I'll take you over to the hub. Righto, so here we are at the hub, taking my big tub of grease, sticking my fingers in, getting a big dollop of grease, and I'm just basically going to pack the outside of the hub. Now, it doesn't need to be oozing and flowing. You probably think that is, but I'm just doing that. And now I'm going to come over to the stub and do the same over here. Now, sorry, it's not a lot. It looks like a lot, but it's not. Now, I don't really want to go too high up here because that's where the seal is going to sit. Now, I do want the seal to be clean because any grease that goes outside of here can eventually fling out and end up on my brakes, which is bad. So I'm just a little bit there, and with what I've got there and around that cup, and on the other side I'll do the same. That is all I need to do for my bearings to be packed. So I'll go and get my other bearing and I'll put it in, then I'll hammer the seal in, I'll show you the other side, and then I'll show you putting the hub back on. Right, so I've just set the bearing in just as you saw it on the bench. I've got my seal, I'm going to sit it in there like so, and with my hammer, I'm going to need 2 hands, I reckon. I'll get it started. So I've got it started. Now I've just got to go down until the seal's flat. Now that's a little bit tricky because I can't do this one-handed. So I'm going to put this down and I'm just going to hammer it down to literally the top surface of the seal is flush with that face. Right, so that's what it should look like when it's finished. I've just gone through and given it a good little bit of a tap. Now I'm just going to get a little bit of grease and run it around that inner lip of my bearing. And before I put all this back on, you can see there's a few spatters. I'm actually going to get a bit of thinners and just wipe the inside out with a dry cloth just to remove any grease and any chance of grease contamination on my brake shoes. And Wayne, looking amazing. Now I'm going to turn it over. And what I want to do is just make sure I've got a little bit of grease in here, which I do, before I grab my freshly packed bearing and sit it in the hub. Now that hub is ready to go back on, and it's going to be tricky holding a camera, so I'm going to put the hub back, put the camera down, put the hub on, hopefully sit the camera in a spot you can see it happen. Alright, so the process of putting this back on is the reverse of taking it off. I've just got to be careful when I put it on to not damage the seal. Or pop the bearing out. There we go. That's on. Now, wash up. And Cascellated Nut. Right, now some of you might think tight is tight, so you just get your spanner into it and rip it up, but that's not the case. We need a little bit of movement, but not a lot. I'm just going to get my spanner and I'll be back. Rule of thumb is, this is a big shifter, because I have some. Tighten it up, give it a bit of a spin, loosen it off, and it's really just the weight of the spanner. Nothing more, nothing less. You're not tightening it up like crazy. You do that and you'll destroy your bearings. Just the weight of the spanner. If I go too tight, it's going to cook the bearings. If I go too loose, I'm going to get a little bit of free play, but that's not the end of the world. So loose is where we're going. Now, split pin. Okay, you might remember earlier, the split pin had been put through and they'd folded it using they'd folded both tangs up or down, in this case it was. I'm only going to fold one, like so. I'm going to give it a little bit of a knock with a little hammer, like so. Here we go. I'm going to cut off one-handed bit of the excess, and then with this bit down here, I'm just going to cut it off completely, because the reality is it's a split pin, and its job is to just not pull out so this nut doesn't come undone. This nut's not coming undone, so everything that is there, everything that needs to be there is there. So in theory now, wheel bearings are done on this side, and I hope once I put the dust cap back on as well, I hope that's given you a little bit of insight to how your brakes work and how potentially you can repack your own bearings at home should you wish. Hope that helps. So I've got to now go and do the other side. I don't think you need to watch that, but that is in essence repacking the wheel bearings on a Tanami.